Hello and good day. This is the Bible Bard podcast episode 167, and we're talking today about the meaning of the signifier in the Bible called that day. Here's the place we're at. The Bible uses repeated words and phrases as literary shortcuts, and these words and phrases point beyond themselves to larger ideas in the text. In a literary study, such as what we're doing, the word or phrase that functions as a symbol or shortcut is often called the signifier, and the idea it points to is called the signified. For example, the word walk can simply mean moving one's feet. But in the Bible, walk often means a person's way of life. The phrase walk with God, or walk in darkness, or walk in the way, or walk by faith, all use walk to point beyond physical movement to spiritual truth. In literature, when we understand any word, phrase, image, action, or patterns or sound that carries meaning can function as a signifier. But we want to look at the signifier, a particular one from the Bible today called that day. It appears in the literature, and we need to understand what it signifies. In the Bible, the phrase that day does not simply mean one calendar day. It appears as a literary sign. Sometimes it points to a past historical day. Sometimes it points to a repeated Memorial Day. And what we're interested in today is the prophets, where it is used to point to a future day when God acts judging evil, restoring his people, or establishing a literal kingdom on planet Earth. The literary repetitive phrases in the Bible cause us, as we read, to stop and ask, what day is signified in the content, or what is God doing on that day? And here in a few texts from the Bible, we'll use that signifier. We'll read what it says, and you can make up your own mind. Quote, "The Lord alone will be exalted in that day." That's from Isaiah 2:11, the NIV version. Comment, we ask, which that day? And the text responds in the context of the chapter. So we look at that local context for this verse we just read, the Lord will be exalted in that day. And the chapter has this, in the last days, and then gives a list of events that will occur that culminate with this text, the Lord alone will be exalted in that day. That's Isaiah 2:13. So last day in this context means or that day in this context means the last day on planet Earth. Then the prophet Isaiah uses the phrase that day some 44 times to indicate a time from his point of view in which something prophetic will happen. He also uses the phrase in that day to continue to describe that day that occurred previously in the narrative. Here's another example. Quote, "In that day, the branch of the Lord will be beautiful and glorious, and those who are left in Zion will be called holy. The Lord will wash away the filth of the women of Zion. He will cleanse all blood stains from Jerusalem by a spirit of judgment and a spirit of fire." That's from Isaiah 4, verses 2 through 4 in the NIV. Comment, this in that day speaks metaphorically of a person or a nation that becomes beautiful, like a woman who washes herself after her monthly period ends, which is like God cleansing Jerusalem of its history or spiritual and physical murder by a spirit of judgment and fire. This phrase continues often to describe this catastrophe, as in the next text, quote, "That day will be a day of wrath, a day of distress and anguish, a day of trouble and ruin, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and blackness, a day of trumpet and battle cry. That's from Zephaniah chapter 1, verses 15 and 16. Comment like before, when we ask which that day, the text responds in the context of the chapter, stating in verse 14, quote, "The great day of the Lord is near and coming quickly," end quote. That's from Zephaniah 1, verse 14. This connected signifier, the day of the Lord, shows up 31 times in the Bible, and this repetition usually seems to point to a catastrophic time on earth when God judges an unrepentant humanity for their wickedness. Discussion. To find this signifier that day repeated in the New Testament, we look and we see the text like this next example, quote, "I know whom I have believed, and am convinced that he is able to guard what I have entrusted to him until that day." That's from 2 Timothy 1:12 NIV. And then there's this one, quote, "May the Lord grant that he," this person, Onesiphorus, which Paul is discussing, "will find mercy from the Lord on that day," end quote, 2 Timothy 1:18. So here in these two verses, we have a kind of oblique reference to the Hebrew signifier that day, used in a positive sense to indicate God's mercy for some during a time of judgment for others. Yet the catastrophic nature of many Old Testament references also continues. Here's another quote, quote, "But the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will disappear with a roar. The elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and everything done in it will be laid bare," end quote, from 2 Peter 3:10, the NIV. Comment. We find this, the day of the Lord, quote, repeated in the New Testament at least 5 times in that context. The literature of the Bible has many more phrases that act as memes or shortcuts to a more complete meaning, or signifiers in our discussion today that point to meanings that can continue throughout the narrative, as we see that the signifier that day does. Summary. The Bible uses these repeated phrases to build meaning over time. That day is one of those phrases. It becomes a literary signal. When we hear it, we should ask, which day is that day under discussion? Is it a day of judgment? Is it a day of restoration? Is it a day of mercy, kingdom, or final reckoning, or just a certain day to remember? The Bible Bard podcast provides in the text itself so that no listener can hear these phrases, so that all listeners can hear these phrases in their context with their original weight. As in other literatures, both spiritual and humanistic, the Bible uses signifiers in the text to create communication, which over time is not only understood by members of a believing community, but extended into a literary or spiritual language that is understood within the community, but becomes a hindrance for people outside of the community. They don't understand the spiritual language, so the community of believers becomes, over time, like a culture. And when you are raised to understand the signifiers and the signified in the religious language of your community, there's almost a universal human tendency to drift away from the original meaning and have the signified become decreasingly meaningful as the generations continue to replace each other. For example, this is why the Bible Bard does not use the King James Version in our podcast very much, because that ancient English language is a kind of a dialect, and the audience would have to overcome their understanding of English to not just modern English, but add to it this special dialect of English from the past. And so we don't want to put that hindrance in front of you, so we don't use the KJV. In the Bible, the literary text also experiences a danger as interpreters over generations tend to wave away the original literary and immediate and fervency of the signified, and they start abstracting the signifiers into something so symbolic it has no impact on either the community or on the outsiders who might want to understand what's going on. The Bible Bard continues to provide the actual text of the biblical literature to those who've never read it, because they are most likely to feel the original intent of the text frequently because they're not yet part of the community of Bible believers. Conclusion. A bard is a storyteller who recites traditional texts in the past associated with a particular oral tradition, but I'm here now to recite and to amplify what the literature of the Bible says about who is God and who are human beings. This is the way the Bible Bard works. There are brief recitations, closely focused from the Bible, no distractions, no rabbit trails. We're talking about what the literature of the Bible states, the ideas and concepts it presents, because most people have never engaged with biblical thought. Make up your own mind whether you agree or disagree with the Bible's pronouncements. You can also, if you agree, go to www.biblebard.org to download a transcript, listen to another episode from the archive, or get links to other materials and information. Remember, the Bible Bard English podcast is translated into other languages, including Spanish, Hindi, Nepali, Urdu, Swahili, Chigua, and Bengali. That one in transcript only. And now we're adding Punjabi, the Indian version. And we're looking for more local translators. You can support the Bible Bard podcast at the website. Just click the Donate tab and make a contribution. Send the Bible Bard any questions or remarks you care to offer to BibleBardUS@gmail.com, and we're glad to hear from you. Connections. You know how this works in podcasts on the internet. We thank you in advance for following and subscribing to, sharing, and commenting on the Bible Bard content from our many platforms. We're on audio podcast platforms, and we also have video versions that are published on those video platforms of the podcast. So until next time, this is the Bible Bard.